NXT TakeOver Brooklyn #2, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to say this ahead of time. There was only 2 matches I truly cared about. The other matches were good, but these were the only ones that mattered to me, and you know from the title, the one that was truly the most important to me. But let's get through everybody else first. No Way Jose versus Austin Aries. This is an interesting situation here, ladies and gentlemen, because it wasn't a bad match. And we had a Hiro Itami come out at the end of that match. But before I get to that, No Way Jose with his conga line was nice. Made me laugh. I enjoyed it. There was no problem with it. The match quality was good. The last chance we locked onto No Way Jose was alright. Then Hiro Itami comes out. If I'm pronouncing the guy's name right, please. If I'm wrong, tell me below. But after Hiro Itami came and did the GTX, we now have a feud between Hiro and Austin Aries. My question is going to be this. Will Austin Aries be allowed to talk and explain why he hates Hiro Itami? Because even though it seems like it's going to be a good feud, we don't have no backstory yet. So if those two have known each other and interacted before in the past, I want to hear it. If they don't really do that in NXT, I'll be quite surprised and it'll be very disappointing. We need a backstory because Hiro Itami had to be explained. Next, Billie Kay versus Ember Moon. Now, I have looked at a little bit of Reality of Wrestling, and I actually considered doing some reviews on it because as far as I know, no one does Reality of Wrestling reviews. Booker T's promotion in Texas. I would not mind doing them if anyone wants me to consider looking at the product more thoroughly and actually seeing if they want to see some reviews of Reality of Wrestling. I might actually do that. I may watch it for a couple of weeks to see if I can really catch up on maybe about 5 or 10 episodes, and then see if I really want to do a Reality of Wrestling review of it, a review series of it, because we don't really talk that much about, well, legends like a Booker T have opened up schools and promotions like on their own, and we really don't hear a lot about them. So this might actually be very interesting to do if I'm given the interest to want to do it. So you guys tell me below if you want to. Do I like the Red Moon little thing? It's an actual interesting situation with her. She almost gives me a Luna LaShawn type of feel, but it counts in how she talks. And now that she's in NXT, if she doesn't talk something like a Luna LaShawn, excuse me, if she doesn't talk like a Luna LaShawn, then this will not work. And I feel like we'll have a problem with that. This gimmick won't work. Now, when it comes to Billie Kay, she definitely gives off a feeling of Victoria. And there's no problem with that. Doing the Widow's Peak, having that type of attitude, it feels right. So I don't know how they're going to put her on there, but I wouldn't mind seeing her like Victoria. Bobby Roode versus, what is it, Lomask. I can't pronounce the guy's first and middle name. I am bad with names, and I'm bad with names that are Spanish, and I gotta pronounce them. They don't work. So I'm not gonna even attempt it. I'm not gonna botch someone's name worse than what I already do. So the match was good. Bobby Roode wins with his new move, which is now supposed to be the Glorious or something. I can't remember the name of it. But essentially, the thing that was the most important is how they presented him when he came out. And being on one of those cherry pickers, Bobby Roode, all the way above the entire arena, coming straight down. I'm going to be honest to you. I did not expect him to go that far with Bobby Roode. Of course, Triple H does have the Nate in his corner. And the Nate knows Bobby Roode. And I was not surprised that he would say, look, Bobby Roode is like me. Book him like me, because that's how they did it in TNA. But I was not sure if they're going to actually pull the trigger on that. I was very surprised they did, because that's what a Nature Boy Ric Flair would get. And that made me so happy to see it. I loved it. I did not expect that. Ciampa and Gargano versus Dash and Dawson, the Revival. This is the first time I've actually been able to remember their names in their entirety. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. I'm bad with words. I'm always bad with names, especially when it came to NXT, because it's hard enough to remember the people on Raw, SmackDown, TNA, and then NXT. I always tend to forget them. But the thing that I got from these guys, it was a contrast between 2 decades. Because the match quality was great. Admittedly, I didn't like the pinfalls. There were so many fake pinfalls that it was in the middle and the end of that match. It did turn me off a bit, because if you got a lot of pinfalls near the end, yeah, you can critique it, but it's not that bad. But when it comes to actually having in the middle of the show of that match, and then also in the end, was a little too much for me personally. They had a lot of pinfall tries in the middle of that match, and then even more at the end. That's just me, ladies and gentlemen. I know a lot of you would say there wasn't that many pinfalls. For me, it was, because I want them to tell more of a grapple story than how many times they avoided to lose the match. But as I said earlier, this is a stark contrast between 2 guys who give off the 80s compared to 2 guys who give off the 2000s. Gargano and Ciampa easy give off the 2000s. And when it comes to Dash and Dawson, they give off the 1980s. They remind me easily of Art Anderson and, Ole Anderson, if I'm pronouncing his name right. The guys who were in, well, I know that's kind of stretching it when it comes to the 4 Horsemen, but they give me that type of feeling of 2 guys who could have easily been considered to go into the 4 Horsemen with that attitude they had. It really gives me that feeling. So the 2000s versus the 1980s, and the 1980s won, which I have no problem with. As far as I'm concerned, if this keeps up, I would love to see them on the main roster as they are, but that's if the WWE would actually realize that they got a 1980-esque team and they need to be pushed like a 1980-esque team and not be screwed over like the Ascension was. Because the Ascension was like the 1990s. When it came to Demolition, and when it came to the Barbarians, and when it came to anyone else, like the early 90s, late 80s, that's what the Ascension gives me the feel of. And what do we get with them? Nowhere. So let's hope they get their understanding in their head. Now, I am going to the final match first, because you guys probably understand the reason why I'm doing it. Samoa Joe versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Now, when it comes to the opening for Shinsuke's intro and having that guy who played the violin, it was epic. I loved it because when you look at Shinsuke, pronounce guys' names bad, sorry. When you look at Shinsuke, he gives me a Beethoven or a Bach type of feel of a guy who's a lowbrow, who is a composer who you wouldn't expect to get such incredible compositions out of, but he blows everyone out of the water. He feels like a prodigy who is really misunderstood, like an Amadeus, like a Beethoven, like a Bach. I know that Beethoven and Bach aren't really like considered oddballs, but in a sense you could say that. At least by my humble perspective, understanding a little bit about music. A little bit about music. Anyway, was the match good? Yes. It was the second, well, I can't really say it's the second best match of the night, because essentially both the women's and the NXT title were both the best matches of the night. I can't really choose between them. So that was the best match of the night for the men. That's the best way I can say it. And Shinsuke Nakamura now, if I'm pronouncing his name right, has become NXT Heavyweight Champion. We're going to have a good feud between him and Samoa Joe, because it's not over yet. This is not going to happen. There's no way that Samoa Joe is not going to try and get his title back. And I don't have any type of fear that Samoa Joe is going to be dropped, because he's too over by the crowd. The people love seeing Samoa Joe get you. I'm sorry. Particularly with that match being that good. And now, the final match of the night. The promo segments for them were very good, showing the individual rises to where they are. The opening for Bayley was good. as Bayley always is. So people love Bayley. But I'm going to be honest here. When it comes to Asuka, I really believe that she's the most over pro wrestler of NXT that they have. I know Shinsuke Nakamura is very over. I know Austin Aries is over. I know a lot of people are over, but let's be honest. Asuka is a true badass. She is totally over. So over, in fact, that when you look at how this match played out, which was an incredibly great match for women, or for men for that matter, it's still the best match of the night next to the men. The men and women's matches at the end of the show were epic. If they had switched Asuka and Bayley's match between Samoa Joe and Shinsuke, I wouldn't have a problem with it because it was that good. In the end, Bayley loses and she gets recognition from Asuka saying, "You did good. Don't feel ashamed of yourself. You gave it everything you had." And that could also mean, because we saw a Becky Lynch and we also saw a Sasha Banks, maybe Bayley's about to head over to SmackDown. This might be her last match because she has no more chances to get her title back unless she's got to rise through the ranks again, which I really believe is not necessary anymore. Bayley's reached the point where she could move to the main roster. Hopefully SmackDown, because from what I can tell, Raw really isn't really there yet. I think it would be better for SmackDown, but then I think if she goes to SmackDown, she's going to have a major problem because there's no title for them yet, at least not yet. So if she goes to Raw, I would understand, but I think she's not going to have a lot to do because you only got like 7 or 8 women. Actually, you got 9 women on the roster, and maybe 7 of them wrestle. So that's what you got. But when it comes to Asuka, and this is my fear, also for Shinsuke Nakamura, and Hiro Itami, well, he just came back, so you can't really say that he's there yet. But for Asuka particularly, that she is the most over character they have in NXT. Will they push her properly? Will they push her at all? Because it's going to reach a point where Asuka's going to move up to the main roster, possibly Raw, because she's that over. I don't think they're going to throw her on SmackDown. They may throw Bayley, like I said. But when it comes to Asuka, it's obvious they're going to throw her onto the main roster. But the question is, will they push her? Historically, the WWE never pushes their pro wrestlers who are Japanese. When it comes to Samoa Joe, they're going to push him. There's a good chance, unless they're going to be that biased because he was from TNA. When it comes to Nia Jax, she's part Samoan. And with her size, there's a good chance she's going to be pushed pretty well. But when it comes to Asuka, my fear is that they'll throw her onto the main roster, the people will go crazy for her, and they'll do nothing with her. Oh, of course, they'll push her pretty good at first. Kind of like an AJ Styles. He went up like this, like this, like this. Went to John Cena. Because that's what we got with John Cena and AJ Styles. He was here, then he went here, and now he's dropped down. He's about to be buried. You guys can tell me the reason why I'm wrong about that, but I don't see it. And that is my total fear about Asuka. This incredibly beautiful woman who seems to be in real life very nice, very intelligent, very beautiful, and has incredible talent and potential to make big money for the WWE, and they won't push her because she's Japanese. Because look at what happened with Yujiri. Look what happened to Ultima Dragon. Every time they have a Japanese wrestler, look at... Calm yourself. Calm. This is #1 reporter for WWE. Tell me you don't know who that is. You know who that is. And he's done nothing. Now he's a commentator. They never pushed anybody who's Japanese properly. Or they didn't even push them at all. So that's my fear. But still, this is a very good show. And I'm very glad to have been doing this review for it. So I hope you enjoyed the Zane review. Please give me a comment below. Watch out for my SummerSlam review that will be coming out tomorrow. You guys have a good day and have a good night. Peace!